So across both the UK US businesses, we reach about 20 million employees. Helpfully, both companies have just become profitable. We've raised 125 million equity, $1 billion in debt. If you look at our Trustpilot, we have over 20,000 reviews, 4.9 out of 5. But the term lifesaver is used over 1,000 times.
That's Asesh Sarkar, co-founder and CEO of Salary Finance and board member of Bay HQ. What he's been able to build is incredible, but it's come with costs along the way.
Kind of since we last spoke, I had alopecia because of stress. It's now gone. And so you just have to kind of go through those times. It's just part of it. It's not about going from A to B as quickly as possible. And then when you do that, a key part of it is survival. Okay, focus on what matters, focus less on what doesn't matter. Definitely do things kind of health-wise. You can't get that back.
Asesh sees entrepreneurship as a way to make positive societal change, as he outlines in his book, Common Good Capitalism.
My aim is to create like a multi-generational business, basically a business that kind of really changes financial services for the good. So I chair a charity called Money Ready. They were called My Bank a while ago, they just rebranded. And so charity focuses on financial education in everyday schools. And then we reduced homelessness to 2% instead of 50. Kind of being relatively sanguine to or logical around what the right structure is, and there are other types of structures as well. But being very impact focused, very research backed.
So Asesh, great to have you back here again, 200 episodes later. So if anybody hasn't heard your origin story, go to episode 46. But tell us what's been happening since. So when I think you came on last time, it was quite soon after the merger. So can you tell people what happened to the merger? How's it been going?
Very much. So we've got two businesses, business in the UK, Salary Finance, a business in the FinFit US, but both do the same thing, financial services through the workplace. I think when we last met, we had a merger in the US, and then we were 2 years post a merger in the UK, or a buyout in the UK as well. I would say at that time, there's a lot of excitement about mergers and so on, acquisitions, M&A in general. The reality is the work starts after it. There were various scaling challenges, kind of as there was. Actually, I think when I met you, we were in the midst of some of those challenges. I've been in entrepreneurship for now 10 years. As you learn, one of the big skills is just staying the course. Thankfully, I think it's been a couple of years since we were kind of last spoke. We've had ups and downs, but thankfully we've kind of come through the other way. And so, both the UK business is profitable, US business is profitable, good clients, good kind of value. And so, thankfully we've kind of come out of the period, but it was a somewhat challenging period when I saw you last, but thankfully persevered in a good place.
Could you give some idea of the scale and impact that you're working at now as well?
Yeah, sure. So across both the UK, US businesses, we reach about 20 million employees. And so in the UK, that includes 20% of the FTSE 100. In the US, also Fortune 500 companies. In the UK, also 1 in 3 NHS trusts, 8 of the big 10 kind of supermarkets. And they collectively employ 20 million people. Those 20 million people's, by companies, Salary Finance in the UK, FinFit in the US, we provide employee benefits designed to improve their financial health. We do just over across both countries, about 100 million in revenue. Helpfully, both companies have just become profitable, kind of 10 years in. But broadly, we employ, maybe 400 or so people across the UK, US. Then we also have teams in India and South Africa as well.
And obviously, the impact you've had through that is massive, because for people who don't know, is obviously you're enabling people who might not be able to get access to finance otherwise to get much cheaper loans, and that obviously has such an impact on not only them but their families and the people around them too. And how has your role changed over time? Because you've obviously been leading this for such a long time, and I know last time we spoke is that because of the merger and because of the way things were going, now you had much more senior leadership team in place.
That's right.
That frees you up a bit. So what's been happening there?
Yeah, absolutely. You go through different stages. I guess I was fortunate to be the founder. But actually, we were just celebrating our 10-year anniversary, or have celebrated our 10-year anniversary as a company. And so, we went from helping one employee, which was my children's nanny 10 years ago, to now obviously helping a much bigger community of employees. But then, so raised a lot of capital along the way. The kind of businesses are now of reasonable scale. But at the beginning, it's very much about you. At the end, it's all really about the team. Actually, after this, We've had a couple of changes in the leadership team. We've actually got one individual that's moved from our UK business to our US business. And so we've got a bit of a rejig. I always like seeing talent rise. And so we've got, a number of colleagues, which is also just kind of coming up to leadership team. And we've got a kind of a kickoff kind of later on today after this session. And basically the first thing I'll say is there's no I in team. And, the last leadership team, took us through a pretty challenging 2-year period. We've got to a good place now. And so this is really now gearing up the next team. And the first thing we'll do is look at, from a first principles basis, what is the purpose of a leadership team? What do we do? How do we work? We spend a lot of time together. How do we enjoy it? And then equally, how do we make sure the leadership team serves to kind of wider teams? But yeah, it is very much about team.
And what do you enjoy most now that you get to do?
It's a very good question. I guess as a entrepreneur, you like building, doing things, moving fast, so on. And then once you get to a certain scale, equally, you have to be a bit more considered in how you kind of operate. Things which are done quickly can then lead to challenges kind of later on. And so you do have this evolution from being an entrepreneur, quite scrappy, to just being more kind of systemized. And equally, there is sometimes a question around, okay, well, how long is an entrepreneur good for? Are they good for the entire journey, like someone like a Zuckerberg? Or actually, so there is a school of thought on, okay, entrepreneurs are good at the beginning, but then you need a professional manager to kind of come in, and then you always kind of work out, okay, kind of which one of those are you. And so for me, I enjoy being part of a team to achieve kind of great things. I think the edge I have as an entrepreneur is that I am, kind of creative, finding angles. I'm very rooted in the mission of the company because that mission is kind of authentic to me. And kind of what, some of the challenges I kind of see in the world. And so I guess, part of it is recognizing the importance of the team and enabling them to succeed, but also just being able to kind of guide it, push it. And there'll be times I will say with the team, which is, most of the time, most of my kind of colleagues know more than me in their subject areas, but there will be times where I can't necessarily explain it, but I'll make a call which is counterintuitive. And I need the team to kind of go with it. And it's like a mutual respect thing. Because I always want to be in a situation as a founder and entrepreneur where if things do go wrong, that should be because of a decision I've made, not because of something, of a call that I thought was wrong. But thankfully, sometimes you get things right. Sometimes you get things wrong. Sometimes, there's a certain area where actually I'm going to trust that person's judgment over my own. But I think it's important to be intentional. But what I enjoy most is the kind of creative, maneuvering part of it. But that is only enabled by having a great team as well.
And you said there's obviously been challenges in the last couple of years since you came on. When you were sitting here 2 years ago, is there anything that you wish you could tell yourself back then that would help you to have guided those years that you just had?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say to know there is going to be ups and downs, to simply not expect. I think that's the same with really kind of all kind of entrepreneurs. There is just never a journey. And then the second is, my aim is to create a multi-generational business, basically a business that kind of really changes financial services for the good. It's not about going from A to B as quickly as possible. And then when you do that, a key part of it is survival. And so even if you're having a bad day, a bad week, even if, at the time, I had one of my shareholders question, okay, well, is Asesh good as an entrepreneur? Is it good as a long-term leader? Like it is, as long as you are there surviving day to day and moving forward. And sometimes you have to go back to kind of go forward. Then that is okay. Not everything is just measured in the kind of the here and now.
And you said there about obviously running a multi-generational company. And part of that is to do with your philosophy as well, right? About what you want to achieve through your company and the work you're doing. And you obviously released a book this year, which kind of crystallizes some of that philosophy as well. Can you share more about that and your ideas?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we talked a bit about on the last podcast. So one of my superpowers was also that, I was born in a city, first generation migrant family. Today I run reasonable sized businesses, but also work with a lot of institutions, a lot of high net worths and so on. And so I have a fairly unique view across the spectrum. And I would say I'm fairly well grounded. Actually, last time I came on a podcast, I remember I was really tired because I just flew into Los Angeles. This time I'm really tired because I had my mum with me this weekend. I dropped her off into Leicester yesterday and came back again. And so, Los Angeles and Leicester are quite different. But I just enjoy different types of people understanding and basically, and I enjoy economics and tech and so on. And so, I think there's a lot of issues in the UK, in the US, in the world born by real division in thoughts, in economics, in wealth, and kind of so on. There's lots of, times for like quick solutions, but I think there's kind of some more kind of fundamental issues. So I basically wrote a book called Common Good Capitalism. And I am a believer in capitalism. Like, I believe in entrepreneurship and the good it can do. Like, me setting up a business, like you say, I've employed hundreds of people, or do employ hundreds of people. We've helped millions of employees. We've been a real force for good. So I believe in capitalism and entrepreneurship, but equally I believe in the system. Everyone has to rise together. And basically, in a nutshell, the book, first of all, just describes where I think things have gone wrong. And so if you look post the kind of World War II up until the 1980s, the economy was growing and average real wages was growing together. So everyone was doing well. There's inequality. That's fundamental capitalism. That's no problem. But everyone is rising. And, I was born in the early 1980s. And again, you could generally kind of see people rising. 1980s to today, the economy has continued to grow. And everyone, government talks about economy growing, it's really good and so on. But then when you look at average real wages, that stayed flat. So then the question is, okay, well, if the average person is earning no more and the economy is growing, where's that going? And it's essentially going to the shareholder class. And then, who is the shareholder class and how big are they? And so in the US, it's similar to the UK. The top 10% own 92% of all public company shares. The bottom 50 own 0.2%. So, and you just have these extremes of wealth. And extremes of wealth is not an issue if everyone is rising. But when most people are staying the same, and then you have the shareholder class rising, you start to have real kind of systemic issues. And so for me, there is income inequality, but the bigger thing is wealth inequality. And there's a saying which is, it's easy to make money when you have money, unless we can get everyday people into ownership of companies, whether as an entrepreneur, as a consumer, as an employee, then this is just going to get kind of worse and worse. And so the book presents an idea around companies giving shares to their customers as a reward, because that will make those customers more loyal, generate more ideas, but then those customers will also understand how shares work and gain from it as well. And so, probably the best example at the moment is, if you took a Revolut, for example, even if you were a very early customer in Revolut at a 70 billion valuation, you will have done quite well. And then equally conversely, for the early customers that took a chance on Revolut, they should do quite well as well. And so, I always focus on this, trying to bring society together for everyone's prosperity, because I also think, like I say, I have a reasonable network of high net worths and so on. No one wants to live in a world where most people are really unhappy and you have a few people unhappy. It just doesn't work kind of that way. And so, the whole point of the book, Common Good Capitalism, is just explaining the issues in economic terms, but then just providing some quite practical ways that actually, both society can rise as a whole through capitalism, which I still believe is the best form of, kind of managing a society.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, what you said, because I think now you see much more about personal finance, right? It's become much more in vogue, and people are getting taught about things. But the challenge I see is that a lot of the people teaching personal finance, it's not necessarily good advice.
Yeah.
And it's always a struggle, right? And I know, for example, you have work with charities you help in this front too, to try and increase that knowledge. Would you want to highlight those as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I chair a charity called Money Ready. They were called My Bank a while ago. They just rebranded. And so charity focuses on financial education in everyday schools, generally kind of state schools. And the whole aim is trying to teach money habits early. And so kind of, people, they call it, the language of life. But you have a level of fluency in money as you grow old, which is just incredibly valuable. Because, and also I think if you are from a low income family, like I was, you haven't necessarily been kind of taught it, or you don't necessarily have good role models. And if you have limited means, you have the cost of mistakes is also much higher. So it's basically trying to prevent that. And just give an example of one of their programs. And so, we work with councils, and when a child comes out of care, there is generally a 50% probability of them becoming homeless. And so what these councils do is, when they're giving them essentially homes for the first time, you have to go on a Money Ready course before you get the first home. And then we reduced the homelessness to 2% instead of 50%. And we do very basic things. We're teaching you how to read the meter. we're teaching you about a credit score, we're teaching you about budgeting, we're teaching you about saving. Nothing kind of rocket science, but unless you have been taught the fundamentals, then it's very hard to progress. And there's also just an element of which I think we live in a society which is very consumption first, savings later. And I think, again, that just makes it kind of very, very hard. There's no norms around how much you should save, no norms around, what a reasonable mortgage is for your earnings and so on. So, I think the more you can teach those things, the better. And I think Money Ready, like I say, when I first joined, was a 1 million turnover charity. This year we'll do 5 million. And a lot of the reason why I joined is, although it's a not-for-profit, and my core focus is entrepreneurship, I think a lot of the value of growth that you get from entrepreneurship can also be used to supercharge charities with good missions. And so there's also like a personal project around, okay, well, does that thesis hold true as well?
It's one of the journeys I think we've been on too, about when we started this up, like, what's the best structure for it?
Yeah.
Because, like you said, going for a charity, for example, sometimes it does limit you, because if you can make a business that's doing well, sometimes that will mean that you get more revenue and you can then feed that back in. And it's something we've kind of been always just toing and froing about what's the best way to do it. And I think now we're looking at, with the charity side, is that if you're always dependent on donations, that kind of always leaves you at risk. Whereas if you can have, okay, we're offering value, and it's obviously how you use social entrepreneurship, is that with what you do for salary finance, is that you're really helping these people. But at the same time, it's a business model that makes sense, and because it scales, you can keep increasing the impact. And I think that's something which a lot of people struggle with, is that they want to do something good and they're thinking, no, I can't make a business because that's evil. And for those people in that mindset now who are stuck between, okay, I want to make this impact, why should they do it in a business maybe rather than a charity? And how do you think that?
It's a good question. It's a personal bugbear of mine, which is, I think there is a perception, which is, if you work in a charity or sometimes government, you have a halo around you. You're just a good person. I work in a charity, I'm a good person. And if you work in a business, you're somehow a bad person, or not as kind of, righteous. And I think, the structure is really irrelevant. And so, I care a lot. I'm very passionate about making an impact in society, whether that's, through the provision of, helping employees save, lower the cost of debt, financial education, whatever it might be. And the structure becomes somewhat independent. And so if I look at the UK, I kind of won't name it, but there are kind of non-profits in certain sectors which have huge amounts of government funding but achieve very, very little. And there are also non-profits which are incredibly expensive. Like, their services are way more expensive than a comparable private sector offering, yet there's some sort of kind of halo impact here. And so actually 10 years on, and actually, help, really scale a good charity, scale some good businesses. My overarching view is the importance of research-backed impact. And so if I look at Money Ready, kind of what really gets me motivated, for me, a charity should only exist for as long as it's adding value, because it's taking donations. And so, we're doing this longitudinal study with King's. So we've got, about 6,000 students from a young age, where every year we're doing a program with them, a number of days in their school, and then we're asking them various questions, looking at habits, and so we can see the kind of benefit it does. With salary finance, we've done a number of academic studies, including with Harvard and others, where again they've taken our data. They will conclude, or they have concluded, well, you save about 30% relative if you're using the open market. But also you're 28% more likely to stay with your employer if you use salary finance or kind of FinFit in the US. And so a lot of it now, I think, is the rigor of research and independent validation, as opposed to the structure. And then I think the structure should be whatever you think is best. And so, with Money Ready, we raised 5 million, which is significant. On the salary finance and FinFit side, we've raised 125 million equity, 1 billion in debt. It's hard to do that in a non-profit structure. And so I'd say, kind of being relatively sanguine to or logical around what the right structure is. And there are other types of structures as well, but being very impact focused, very research backed. And I think that then kind of cuts through a lot, or also kind of just helps make sure your product is good and kind of helping as well, whichever the structure is. But I would definitely, like I say, I do believe in capitalism. And so I think you can be a very righteous person and proud, whether you work in the government, a non-profit, or profit. It's really the impact of what you do.
Hello. I hope you're enjoying the show so far. I'm Amardeep Parmar, co-founder of BayHQ and the host of this show. For those of you who don't know, BayHQ is the community for high growth Asian heritage founders and investors in the UK. Over 7,500 people have attended our events, 200 people have been through our impact programs, and obviously there's been over 250 episodes of this podcast. If you want to join us and take part in the programs and come to the events, go to bayhq.com/join. We also just released our first ever book called Startups for Outsiders, which you can get on Amazon now, and the link is in the bio. Hope to see you soon at our event. Hope you enjoy the rest of the episode. You raised another interesting point earlier too about how in entrepreneurship is that people who come from wealth will have some money beforehand. They get more chance to fail, right?
Yeah.
Whereas when people are coming up, if they go straight from maybe underprivileged backgrounds, they don't have the same opportunity. They can't take as many risks, and obviously that limits their impact as well. And something we're thinking about too is that like sometimes you want to help people at a very early stage, but obviously with your career is that you first went into consulting, and obviously that helped to get you out of that initial zone of maybe financial difficulty, so that you could then build the company. And how do you think about that when you're talking to young entrepreneurs? Would you say to them like maybe first of all get some financial security? Would you say try as hard as you can to get grants? And how do you think about that? Because it's something which I know that I'm struggling with sometimes when I'm talking to people. I'm like, actually, maybe it's better for you to just get some money first, then go into it.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I have two children as well. And so I'm going to think about it from them, if you have nephews and nieces and so on. So, I think it's going to no one size fits all. I think for me, it just happened naturally. I finished university, always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but was not able to kind of, I didn't quite have the right idea, or raising funding in the UK is difficult and so on. And I was kind of fortunate, like I said, as a management consultant, I'd just become a partner. I was fortunate to raise some funding on an idea I believed in, and then everything else kind of went. And I do think in the world I operate in today, some of that experience is helpful, but equally, I think there is a huge amount of value in naivety as well. I run a lender which has lent billions of pounds today. I'd never even worked in a lender before, and so that naivety was good. 10 years on, I wouldn't recommend my company hires a CEO that's never worked in a lender, because I've kind of learned as you go. But sometimes that naivety makes you kind of think different. I think you can work in different ways. What I would say also is not everyone needs to be an entrepreneur, and I think entrepreneurs need to be incredibly motivated, high conviction, willing to work hard, self-motivators. If 99 doors close, you're going to find 100th, optimistic. Like there is just a certain thing. And my wife, for example, is better than me in almost most ways. She's a surgeon, but entrepreneurship wouldn't be for her, because she values the kind of structure, she's operating and so on. And actually, a lot of my friends are the same. Actually, they work in corporates. That life suits them, and so on. And so I'd say, one is, I think there are just certain characteristics of being an entrepreneur, and you have to, I think kind of possess those. Kind of since we last spoke, I had alopecia because of stress. It's now gone, and so you just have to kind of go through those times. It's just part of it. But equally, even if you don't believe that is how you're naturally geared, being part of entrepreneurial organizations or missions, I think, is also important. And so, we've hired hundreds of people. We've had people that are entrepreneurial but don't necessarily want to be an entrepreneur or don't want the same risk profile. But I still think there's kind of value there. And sometimes I think 10 years on, would I have been better off as a management consultant, better off what I'm doing now? And I always feel like the impact I've made in the world is kind of far greater, and so I'm certainly happy with that. Kind of happy with that choice, however it might kind of might go. But I think I think a lot of it's personal. I think the other thing I would say is the world is fundamentally changing with AI, and I think it is really hard to predict which jobs exist today that'll exist in the future. It's hard to understand what subjects it is. And so, I would say just being with an open mind, being open to all opportunities. So look at entrepreneurial things, look at kind of more traditional things, learning every day. Things are changing so quickly. Something you might have studied, 8 years for can now be taught in a month. Like So I think, and actually, it's what I try to teach my children is, being a first principles thinker rather than wedded in a single route. And I think in this next phase is just going to be just as important. So in my book, Common Good Capitalism, I talk about wealth inequality. With AI, that is just going to 10x basically, and you want to be on the right side of that. And that is about, being really, really open-minded, looking and learning from everyone around you, and then, take a conviction or whatever you think is right. But ultimately, there are no non-risk moves anymore. It's the reality. There's no like traditional paying jobs, government jobs that you just stay in, government fire people all the time. So yeah, I think there's an element of which, the more you're exposed to things, the more you can pave your own path.
I think it's a really important point as well about the hiring people, right? Because there are many people who are entrepreneurial in some ways, but the actual being the top of the tree and the founder, the amount of stress, and like you said with the conditioned use operative, like I put on loads of weight my first couple of years because I wasn't working out properly, stress eating, still stress eat sometimes, probably too much. But those elements sometimes nobody really talks about, or they try to hide it, because one of the challenges when you first become an entrepreneur is, for many people, they're trying to show that they made the right move in life, which means that they hide the bits that aren't going so well. But then for the people coming up, it's not a realistic view of that, right? And you mentioned there about how obviously you struggled with like stress-related illnesses. How did you manage to get that back into play again and make yourself hopefully somewhat healthy today?
Absolutely. So, when I was last on here, we were kind of 8 years in, and I say for those kind of 8 years, everything went up. Only one direction, and when everything goes up, everyone's on your side. Like that is just the kind of way it works, and everything's kind of good and so on. And as kind of mentioned, as we were then scaling, we're scaling our company, we're scaling in multiple countries, scaling our platform. You just go through scaling issues, and then at that time, what you realize is. And not in a bad way, but everyone starts to question. Okay, well, is the founder good for a longer period? Was it his fault? Did they make a correct decision? So you suddenly start to be you start to question yourself. You have other people question you. Everything is always easier outside in. And then in reality, as I analysed some of the challenges we kind of went through, which thankfully now we're through, sometimes it's just natural. If you're growing at a certain speed, there is a certain time where something you built not knowing the scale you're going to have now has £1 billion sitting on it. You're going to need to do a bit of work on the way, but equally you wouldn't have that level of investment this early in. So there's kind of things. And so for me, the point hit where I've always operated in high stress environments, even kind of prior to this. I'm always busy. I'm kind of naturally geared that way. So it was always very normal for me. And the only time I realized, okay, maybe this is abnormal, is when I started getting bald patches everywhere. And I didn't really care kind of aesthetically, but it was like, okay, well, maybe my body's telling me something that is not. And it wasn't that I felt worse or whatever. I'm always stressed. It's just in the nature of 2 young children and kind of so on and so forth, elderly mum and all that type of stuff. And so, so being, stressed is normal, but that kind of made me realize, okay, maybe this is a bit too far. And it's not that, and thankfully things started to go better and in a good space, but you do also make changes. I exercise more. I'm kind of, I'm much more clear about, I think some of the term you use, I'm much less about people pleasing now. Like, my aim isn't to be my shareholders' pals or whatever. My aim is to kind of deliver kind of good outcomes for as long as I'm the best person to kind of do that. And then equally, you start to realize people aren't here for a long time. A lot of people are here for a good time, and that's not a bad thing. If you put loads of money into a company, you expect better things. You have certain questions you can ask those things, and so a lot of it then became very much around, okay, focus on what matters, focus less on what doesn't matter. Definitely do things kind of health wise. You can't get that back, and then also just taking things day by day. Don't worry about you want to make sure you're going right. Even today, I feel incredibly fortunate, knock on wood, really in a good position with the businesses, but I don't know what the next month, 2 months, year, 10 years, 30 years is going to look like. But what I feel is well equipped to deal with it. I feel the business has good fundamentals, and I think we can work it out. Whereas before it was much like, unless everything was kind of mapped out. And so I would say, for me, it was really the physical manifestation. Also, I'm now 43, 44. So I also have 2 children. So I also think more about, just kind of how many years you have left, health, all of those things, which I think is an important thing. And then a good, age becomes a good thing. You mentioned you injured yourself, you become a bit slower, so it just makes you kind of think more. So which I think is a good thing as well.
Yeah. So I guess people watching the YouTube notice that I'm in my joggers today. And it's because on Saturday I managed to get in the way of a collision during playing football. So I spent most of yesterday in A&E, just going from one doctor to the next and then waiting for my scan, all those different things. And one thing about being in a hospital, I think it does always put things in perspective, because you're sitting there going like, I don't want to be here. And if I don't want to be here, then I need to make changes in my life, because I was there for a freak accident.
Yeah.
But the reality is, like you said, was like with the stress I'm under on a daily basis, there's going to be stuff that goes wrong in my health if I'm not looking after myself. And I think it's really hard for founders to get that perspective. And you don't want to wait for something to go wrong before you do it. And you mentioned there about you made a few health changes and obviously managing kids, managing elderly parents too. And like, as you're going forwards now, like how are you structuring your life to try and obviously maximize your impact while also not sacrificing your health and not sacrificing the other things that are important to you, like your family?
Yeah. You're always sacrificing something. So, entrepreneurship is not a free option. Equally, there's no, you're always kind of making trade-offs. So I'd say the trade-offs I've made, which I think kind of change in life as well. Early entrepreneurship, the trade-off I made was friends, spending time with friends, and a little kind of my extended kind of family. But I kind of prioritized my kind of kids and kind of so on. So very much, I'm always on at work, and also I enjoy work as well. So it doesn't go through. So always on from a business perspective. Always prioritize my kids. I feel as a father, if you choose to bring kids into the world, they deserve kind of priority. I try to be as good a husband as I can, but equally there is, there is a kind of tension there in terms of how much time you can kind of spend, and hopefully, if we work hard now, then that kind of sets us up well for the future. But kind of really friendships, and I'm fortunate to have good friends where you don't need to see them, every week. But equally, it's fun. It's nice, and I think social interaction is important. So early years, that was the kind of trade-off. But I would be reasonably good at exercise and so on, just because I feel a lot better. It's quite tough without it. Now I'm a bit, kind of 10 years on, and so actually, my older son has just started at boarding school. Quite random. We went to see a number of schools who really liked it, and so actually he comes home on a Wednesday if he wants. He doesn't always want to anymore, but comes home at a weekend. And so that's kind of my concentrated time with him. And then my younger son, is kind of 9 or 10, is also kind of quite self-sufficient. So that gives me a bit more time. It's actually, they both like playing golf, and so that's kind of really good. Golf is really good because we could just be out. It's physical. We spend time together and so on as well. Prioritize kind of holidays. Actually just, exercise wise, even this morning, I got back quite late last night. And so I did calisthenics every day now. So I did that at 6 to 6:30, and then I left at 7 to kind of drive here. So you kind of prioritize different things, but I'm definitely now, I use AI a lot, very, very well. That kind of gives me a lot of efficiency. I only say yes to things which I think are going to make a difference for me and the other person. Like, there are times where there are events, whatever, and it's like, maybe it'll be useful, maybe it won't, maybe it's not good enough anymore. Like, it needs kind of more than that. So and then actually, even this morning, I was listening to a podcast I like, and they talk about the importance of sleep. That's I'm not getting as much sleep as I like. So there were always balances, but overall, and I think as you go through different stages of life, you go through different things. But hopefully for this next stage of life for me, kind of 10 years in, a bit more time with friends, a bit more time with family, using AI to get super efficient in my kind of professional work, and then always kind of focusing on children as well.
I think it's always reassuring people to hear when people they look up to are people much further in their journeys are figuring that out too. Because I think sometimes people put people on a pedestal like, oh, they must have it all figured out. But then they put themselves down, right? Whereas when you realize actually people are just trying to make the best thing for them. And it's one of the things, so I've interviewed 400 plus people now, right? And one of the things that I'm always looking at as well is like, if I'm going to look up to somebody, they've got to be heading a direction of life that's what I actually want. Whereas you see some people who might have achieved a lot, but they're still in that very toxic mindset of they're just not giving themselves any break. They're not looking like, they're not spending time with family. They're not spending time with their friends. And I look at it as like, do I want to be that person in 10 years time, 20 years time? And some of the people I've interviewed who are very far along, they kind of have those regrets of like, I just worked all the time. I neglected my family and I neglected my friends. And like, now the business is sold. What do? I have nobody.
Yeah.
And it's a really hard one because I think people can't like, I'm lucky that I get to talk to people like you all the time. But if you don't have that experience, you don't see somebody like that, it's very easy to go down this path where you just almost become very lonely, right?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
And you mentioned too about the people pleasing aspect, about people here for a good time, not a long time. And he said there's nothing wrong with that. But I think if you're always feeling guilty about not helping those people, at the end, you're just putting all that pressure on yourself. And people understand. And I look at it as, I probably speak to about 1,000 people a month, right? Because of the events stuff we do. It's like, I cannot be 1,000 people's best friends. And I don't want to be 1,000 people's best friends. And I think I'm just getting much more clear about that with people. Like, I can't have time to be your friend. And it doesn't mean I don't like you. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. But it's if I don't have enough time with the people I already know and love, then me just doing that with other people doesn't make sense. And like, how have you adjusted to that over time? Because obviously, like, there'll be people who will listen to this and be like, oh, I'd love to go for a coffee with you, right? They won't say what they want. They won't give you any details. And then how do you deal with that today? Like, how do you prioritize who you should talk to and who you shouldn't?
So I think ultimately, even for yourself, like, you want to be clear what your mission is and the most effective way to kind of get there. And it sounds like you have a really good mission. You want to help, kind of democratize entrepreneurship to those that are kind of underprivileged, particularly, in kind of Asian communities. Going one by one is probably not going to maximize your kind of route there. And so I think that is completely fine. And I think everyone always say you just have to kind of live by your choices. And so I think for me, just a different context is, we have, like I say, about probably 300-400 people across Saudi Finance, FinFit, US, UK, South Africa, India. And genuinely, I really enjoy spending time with the team. Like, I really enjoy it. Like, they're really nice people. We work in a very mission-oriented business. It's high growth. And so, and the people are just interesting. I just like people, kind of people in general. And I have the same internally, which is, I'll be walking, to the kitchen or whatever. And, I know I've only got 30 seconds to speak to someone and I feel a bit rude. I'd much prefer to have a much more meaningful conversation. And there's people I think, I've not spoken to them in a while. But equally, if I had a half an hour one-on-one with 400 people, nothing's going to get done. And so I think it's really just being kind of comfortable, and not trying to do too much. So for me at work, I know, my time is with the leadership team because I want to empower them to have great relationships kind of wider down. When it's people that kind of will approach me, if I think they've given me something that allows me to be useful to them, then that's kind of great. I've kind of got no issue with that. Like I say, if it's a general thing, I probably can't be that useful to them. Actually, just looking at some of the stuff I've done, or part of the reason why I wrote a book was to kind of tell some of that kind of story as well. I kind of use different vehicles. But probably the one thing I don't do is feel particularly guilty about it anymore. But then equally, I'm also humble enough, like, in the world, everyone is also chasing someone else. Yeah. Like, if you're a founder of a business worth £1, you envy the person that's worth $1 million. If it's $1 million, you envy the person that's 100 million. If it's 100 million, it's $1 billion. If it's $1 billion, it's $1 trillion. And, even the trillionaire founders are like, why isn't this 10 trillion? And if it's your 10 trillion, then you're kind of like, okay, how do I get to space? Like, whatever it is, like, everyone is always chasing kind of something, but you just need to be kind of comfortable. Not to say people could be, however they feel, but, my view is as long as you're comfortable, you're content. And I think that's important. But yeah, I would definitely emphasize the point around the importance of kind of friendships. And I think that's an important thing. And certainly the entrepreneurs that I see and spend time with, who I have most respect for and probably think they've got more things right than wrong, are never the ones that work all hours and they have no personality and they have nothing to give and they're massive bags in their eyes. They tend to be the ones that are pretty social, have friends, have their boundaries. And then also I think it's the other truth, as we all know, is you work best when you're happy, when you've had a bit of sleep, when you've had a bit of exercise. There is only 24 hours in a day. You have to cut it somewhere. Does it really matter if you cut it at X hours versus Y hours? Does it really matter if your curve goes a bit like this instead of like this? Like, maybe it does. For some people it does. Maybe that's their identity, whatever. But in general, I think, a lot of it has to be about, kind of you, your family, your network, your kind of community and so on.
I think the hard thing with people is at the start you're told, say yes to everything, take every opportunity. But then there comes a point where that's like the wrong thing to do, and you probably say no way more than you say yes, right? And I think as you go up that ladder, that's how the transition changes, and it's a personality change. And I know for us, like for example, so when we started this off, I was speaking to about 200 people a day on WhatsApp because that's how we got those relationships. But now that the community is of 10,000 people or like way more than that, I can't chat to all of them. And that setting the boundary is the new interesting part. And even, for example, this football injury, right? That's because every weekend it's my like uni friends.
That's great.
So most of them don't even know what I do for work. And like, I don't care because for me, I just get to be me again. And I don't always want to be Bay HQ. And like, it's good to have that separation of personality. And I always say is that the people who are friends as opposed to business friends are the ones that we could have an entire 2-hour chat and none of the business stuff comes up at all. Yeah. Whereas if we're only friends because of the business, it still add value to my life. It's still great to have you. But then you're not like a friend that I'd invite to my wedding, for example.
That's right.
And I think a lot of people get those lines very blurred up. And like, obviously now you have the different things outside of work, right? But inside your work and within your business, what are the things you're planning in the future? Where is your focus going there?
Good question. So I'd say 10 years into my current businesses, I wrote a book at a time where I was kind of thinking, well, do I want to go again? Actually, is it the right time to actually have, another CEO run my businesses while I would then, use all of the knowledge I've got and do something? I've got no shortage of ideas. I'd say where I am today is, businesses are doing well. As a result, there are more people that are my fans than when things are challenging. It's the nature of how it goes. Hopefully that continues. And I think I'm not kind of fascinated by, I think there's a lot of talk in AI and stuff around, okay, the fastest to get this ARR or so. Well, I think that's good, but I think ultimately entrepreneurship is an endurance sport. If you're trying to build a company which is really trying to change the fabric of society in some way, and our way is to kind of change the fabric of kind of finance for for everyday people. And so I am really content with current businesses. I want to grow them. I want to scale them. I want to increase the impact. It's still really exciting because I don't know which direction they're going to go in. As in we of course have a strategy, a plan, all of those types of things. But we've gone from where we were, which was an idea, to where we are today. And so, yes, I have a plan which goes here, but, we should have a plan which kind of goes to, there are moves we can make which gets kind of much more. And so, so I'm very much focused on, rather than trying to do loads of different things, really ground in, not kind of think, okay, 10 years and so should we do something else? But it's actually 10 years, we've got an amazing platform. Let's now work out how we 10x this, because just the bigger you get, every time you 10x something, it's just a multipliers kind of work. And then the kind of world is kind of changing, but finance is an important part of that. So I think it's an interesting place to be. But yeah, my aim is to kind of, on the work side, rather than come up with something new and start again, all those types of things, is really kind of channel that into the kind of things I'm doing to build it at a big scale. And I think most companies today, which are of good size, meaningful, are not overnight successes. They take time. And so, I kind of want to really kind of see it through. And I feel very good about that. Whereas I think there have been times, the past 10 years, I was thinking, okay, well, what do they call it? Being a serial entrepreneur is good. What if I have a CEO here and I do that there, and I'm doing this there, and I've got, this there. And again, for that kind of works for some people. I kind of, be the right thing. But yeah, for me, I guess I've learned about myself. I like doing things deeply. I like doing it well. And sometimes things take a bit of time. And in general, I've found, for me at least, seeing things through kind of is when you get the most payoff. And sometimes that's kind of later on in the journey as well.
And the book itself, right, is complementary to what you do.
Yes,
but it's also its own project too. Right?
Yes, yeah.
And after working so long within Salary Finance, how did you find that book project and doing something there and releasing it, and also getting the reviews in and getting feedback from people? How did that feel? Because what I see is in my position too, as the paradox of, at the beginning, it might be scary because you haven't done it before, you haven't done something in public. But then the further ahead you are, the more expectations are of you, right? So writing a book as somebody who's built a giant business, the expectation of that book is much higher. How did you find that kind of pressure and relationship?
Good question. I would say I wrote the book, generally I like writing. I found it quite therapeutic. I have a lot of ideas. I get, I follow economics and politics and tech a lot, and I get frustrated by the piecemeal thinking. Of course, this issue is here, but you've forgotten about all of these other things. And so I found, I found the process of thinking about it, structuring it, writing really enjoyable. I actually wrote the entire book while I was traveling in the US. I do a lot of kind of travel, kind of place to place, and so it was quite, it was enjoyable. And so I kind of found that, I found the process of it just because I like writing in general, kind of enjoyable. And then I also found it helpful for my current businesses because, again, there's a lot of research around, kind of history, economics, all of those things, which I think is based. And I think also, we live in a world where, most people don't ask questions. They don't understand how the world works, understand how politics work, tech works, and nor did I. But and so part of the reason for the book is to try to simplify concepts which are actually quite simple. It's just that most people in positions are very poor explaining things simply. And so for me, I kind of enjoyed it. I don't have huge expectations kind of on the book, but also I was also finding that quite often I meet people. And rather than having to explain things each time, actually, if there is a book that people have read, then it also kind of helps kind of tell that story. And also for the people that work at my current companies, clients, so on. Again, the more they understand about the thinking, the more we can kind of raise things, because there is definitely a lot of philosophy behind what we do as well. Like my aim wasn't I'm not chasing a certain ARR number, or I'm not chasing a certain award. I'm not chasing anyway. I kind of view there's some pretty systemic issues in the country. I think technology can be a force for good, and then I kind of work out kind of how to do that. And I kind of excite people to kind of focus on this mission. And I thought a book was a good kind of a good way to do it. I also do think I think you use podcasts as a mean to cut through, get your message out, which I think is very good. And actually, I think elections are being won or lost on podcasts. Yeah, and that's a new medium. And I think actually being an author is quite a new medium for non-traditional authors around getting your voice kind of through the kind of noise, basically. And so I think in that direction, again, it's kind of helpful.
Because obviously you just released my book as well recently, so I'm going to give you one afterwards.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't know if I told you, you've got a mention in there.
Thank you.
So, well, hopefully it's correct. So we'll see. But it is that thing, I think, as we're looking forwards, is that now of AI, is I see is in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, people are going to distrust whether the book was written with AI or whether it was written by a person. And then, in a way, I think you might have the similar personality trait. Because it's difficult, that's what makes it fun. It's like, how do I structure my thoughts? How do I put this in the right chapter structure? How do I explain this concept? And that clarity of thought to get something down into a book, to me, is like a very useful experience. And you've had the book out now, so January came out, right?
That's right, yeah.
Is there any hopes or plans for writing another one, or is this a one and that's the life's work?
I feel like I'm kind of like mid-career. I kind of like working in general, so I don't see myself stopping anytime soon. But yeah, maybe towards the end, I've learned a load of stuff up until this time, a lot of which is featured in the book. And I always think, from where I started to where I am now, and hopefully I've got a similar and hopefully bigger trajectory ahead. And so there's still a lot of life to kind of live and to kind of learn. I spend a lot of time in different countries. And so, yeah, if I can help provide perspectives that are useful to people, then very happy to. Yeah, so certainly nothing in the kind of short to immediate term. But I do feel increasingly, we talked about last time, I'm somewhat introverted. But equally, I do have the fortune of having many interesting experiences. And so mediums which feel comfortable to me to kind of share some of that, I think is a good thing as well.
I also find as well, there's so much learning in that first book of how to do it in the process that it almost feels a waste now if I don't write another one, because now it should be a lot, in theory, it should be a lot easier next time, right? And you mentioned about the podcast and the medium here, is like, what I find is really useful, and with a lot of people, for example, where by doing this podcast now, when people Google you or people apply to salary finance, they're going to listen to this episode.
Yeah, exactly.
And you probably have the experience, right, of people who know stuff about you.
That's right.
And I think that's something really underestimated about when people think about podcasts. People often think about it as like, how many views does it get? But it's the importance of the people listening. If it's somebody who's on the fence about accepting a job with salary finance versus another company, but they've listened to this and like, okay, no, I really like their mission, I really like their thinking, that one person might scale you 10x, but they would have joined the other company had they not heard this. And I think it's always really interesting to me, those like binary decisions that you necessarily can't attribute to where exactly it comes from. But looking at a book, looking at a podcast, and these different things, it's all one to many, right? You sit here once, then many people can listen to it. And I think a lot of founders don't appreciate that concept enough, is that get yourself into places where you have one to many, rather than repeat yourself a million times on a million different calls. And it makes your time go way further. So what we're doing now, so if you came on 2 years later from your last episode, and if we get you on again 2 years later, so it'll be 2027 September time, what would you love to say that you've been able to achieve in that time, or how things have changed for you? So what we're going to have is we're going to have a TV up here and you'll play this back. It was like, oh, what happened?
That's a very good question. In many ways, I would say part of what I don't do, I obviously do it from a business context, is try to set goals, just because the world is changing so much. You take most of, all of your opportunities, and also just kind of wider life. What does the direction kind of look like? So, in the UK today, we support a community of 4 million employees. In the US, we support just over 15. Ultimately, our impact is determined by the size of that community. And so I would like that community to be, at least double. Yeah. And so we're kind of helping more people. We deliver financial services through the workplace at a decent scale in the billions. But I'd like us to be like a top 3 non-bank lender, or maybe even become a bank, but I'd like to be like a top 3. So kind of doing it at kind of scale. So it's kind of mainstream. I would, you want to question just at the beginning was, the difference between, I and team. A lot of people have added a lot of value to salary finance. They've been great colleagues, and I want them to do really well as well, professionally, financially. I want them to be kind of rewarded for their work as well. And then overall, I would say, like, if you look at our Trustpilot, we have over 20,000 reviews, 4.9 out of 5. But the term lifesaver is used over 1,000 times. And so, I kind of want to create just, again, multiply that experience we're having on people. And that would be through products we're doing today, but also products we haven't even dreamed of. And like I say, all around this theme of helping everyday people kind of progress in life. And so I think it's a continuation, but a multiple. I don't think 2 years is something I can achieve in 2 years, but I am a big believer in public markets. I think with private markets, if you look at really good companies where they just have private shareholders, when they do really well, all that happens is those private shareholders become wealthier. When a company goes public, then actually much more of that growth goes into the wider public. And so I would, at some point in my career, like I said, I hope you have a long career ahead, like to experience a public company. I don't think that's a 2-year goal, and maybe it could be this time, maybe it could be another time. I hope it will be this time. But I'm very fascinated. I don't know much about it, but I'm very fascinated around the benefits of being a public company and IPO and kind of so on. And so, hopefully in 2 years' time, if that's still where the world kind of is, having a clearer view of kind of what that means for me and the businesses.
So one of our patrons is Neil Shah, who's the head of tech at London Stock Exchange Group.
Fantastic.
So after this, I'll connect you guys. So now moving on to the quick fire questions. So first one is, who are 3 Asians in Britain you think are doing amazing work right now?
Rishi Khosla, CEO of Oaklaw. I think it's a really great business, and also I think he's doing a lot for entrepreneurship in general, not very self-promoting, which I think is a good thing. Actually, someone else who's not very self-promoting, but I think is building a good business, which is Jaydev, the CEO of Zopa. And the third, and this is a very non-political point, but I think for Rishi Sunak to become the Prime Minister is I was in India very recently as well. I think it's made, lots of, I think immigrant or first generation children in general believe they can get to the kind of highest powers. And I think to have a successful business career, which he did, to then translate it to politics and then to become into the highest office is all very impressive. I should say I am apolitical in that I have a first principles thinker with any government. There's things I like, dislike in different proportions, and so it's not that I'm necessarily a diehard Rishi fan of them. But I think what just as an individual, first generation migrant to come into a country, I think is impressive and definitely deserves some praise.
Yeah, it's like I said on the last point as well, is that for people making impact, sometimes being able to work with every different party is really important. And it's very easy for people to become tribal, but there's different parties that are doing different things which are good. And there are different people in those parties who are forces for good. And if you can work with them and that makes people happy and makes a difference to their lives, it's good for everybody, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And if people want to find out more about you and your companies, where should they head to?
So Asesh Sarkar on LinkedIn, Salary Finance or FinFit for the companies. And then you can buy Common Good Capitalism on Amazon.
And is there any way that people listening today could help you or help Salary Finance?
It is a good question. Look, we are always looking to grow the companies we work with in our network. And so, if you are, if you run a big company and the financial health of your employees matters, then certainly please do reach out.
So thanks so much for coming on, and I'll mention this in the intro as well, but obviously you sit on our board, so thank you for all of the work you've done there. Have you got any final words for the audience?
No, I would just say just to you and Gerber particularly, just congratulations on everything you're doing. Yeah, going from 0 to kind of 1 is really tough. And like I say, from my own personal experience, is that entrepreneurship has been great for me. I love it, but also it's been great for the hundreds of people we employ, for the millions in our community that we kind of help. And so I think entrepreneurship is a real force for good. That's only been possible because of the amount of capital we've been able to kind of raise along the way. And I think your focus around and so I think entrepreneurship in a very inclusive way is really important. I think kind of what you do within that is really important. So I can say congratulations to you, and very happy to kind of help in any way I can to kind of support your mission too.